I be doing you a disservice not telling y'all this shit. Some of y'all just scroll right on by this nigga like, ah, man, whatever, nigga. And that's fine too. But all to rock with me, know what I say. You cannot say that you haven't been told. On the day of when the great and dreadful day of the Lord approaches you, you cannot say that you haven't been told. You could say you forgot, because we are forgetful beings. We are Enoshats, right? It's another way of saying mortals. Very forgetful. You had to leave your oceans of conscious behind in order to incarnate into this dimension. It made you quite forgetful because you couldn't bring that ocean of consciousness here. You only needed a 20-ounce Coke bottle worth. So you don't know all of the aspects of who you are oceanically. In the capacity of the omnipresent. As in being one with all. Not as the all, but one with all. See, you done fell from that state of consciousness all the way down to this little ass body. Where you got to have 5 senses and they got to give you some RAM. Right? RAM is computer acronym code for random access memory. So you can randomly access memories up to a certain gigahertz or terabyte. But it's a limitation. You hear me? Because you in a limited RAM. You want it to be a human, you got to take on a limited, you got to operate in a limited capacity. It's no more operating in the in the omnipresent capacity because you wanted a body. You wanted a gender. You wanted emotion. You wanted to have your own thoughts, your own desires. You wanted your own body. You didn't want to be a part of the all no more. So you fail as an individual. And I told you guys before, individual was internally divides you from all. You want to be an individual. You want to be you. You got a way that you want to do it. You got a way that you want to see. I don't want to be a part of the all. I want to be me, nigga. Let me do me. That's the most egotistical thing a person can say. That's a true sign of that you're not aware of yourself. You're already doing you. Why would you ask somebody else to let you do you? That means that you're incapable of doing you. But we don't know that because they've been cast spells on your ass. And the only way that we can communicate is with the spell-based syntax. Right? I could say I could see the store from here. And that letter C comes up in your subconscious mind instead of just seeing with your eyes. Why they couldn't just choose another way to say to look at something? And then they do look. You got look and then you got C. Then you got the letter C. Why somebody did that on purpose? Why are you trying to keep us confused? Who gave you the right to do that? And what's going so right in this reality that we should be doing? Nothing. It's not going right. It's making you just pay attention to yourself so you can't see. You ain't even paying attention to yourself. It makes you operate from a level like you only can see yourself. Okay, segment asks, is Nebuchadnezzar connected with the sacral? No, Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, you could put her there. You could put her there because of Anubu, who was her son. So yeah, she does have a connection there. Segment. You right on time. Any other questions? Any other questions? So what is Nebuchadnezzar connected to? Nebuchadnezzar or Nebhut, some people say Nephthys, that's the Greek way. She is the consort of Sutuk, and she is also, I want to say, the seventh child of Geb, right? Asaru, or Set, Nephet, or Nebuchadnezzar, right? As you say, Sutuk, Tefnut, and Shu. All of those are children of Geb, right? Those are Geb's children. Nephet, which a lot of people don't know, I don't know if you know this or not, segment, right? But what happened was Sutuk was sterile and he could not produce children. And since this being couldn't produce children, her sister Offset went to Asaru. And I got this story up on my school. Y'all could go click the link in my bio and join the classroom on school. I'm telling you, I better get it after these 90 days. You're going to have to pay. Just keep it at 10K with you, right? But get it right now while the getting is good. Nebhat received the semen of Asaru from Offset, right? And she took his semen and inserted it into her sister. That's who got the first in vitro fertilization on the planet. It was Nephet, right? Or Nebuchadnezzar, right? She was the first ones to receive that. So the child that she ended up having was a Nubu. But what happened was Satuk came back from fighting the wars with his grandfather, Ray, and seeing that his wife was pregnant with child. This is where they get the story about Mary being pregnant by some angel called Gebrael. And when you look at the word Gebrael, you can see the name Geb, you can see the name Ra, and you can see the name El, right in the word Gebrael. That's taking you right back into the Happy Now Valley again. So that's how all of these things is connected, is through Geb. Geb is the father of Nebhat, right? And that's her connection. Listen, that's her connection to the Enad. That's her connection to the father, who is Ray or Ra, right? So when they had the child came out and it was a Nubu, but it didn't belong to Satuk. And Satuk was pissed off and put his brother in the sarcophagus. And that's why he chopped him up into 14 pieces. It's because he was like, nigga, you impregnate my woman? And she was being messy as hell because she didn't even tell the nigga what really happened, right? And all said, she dirty too because she didn't even warn. She didn't even tell Asaru what she was using the sperm for. And that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But let's not play. I hope that answers your question, beloved. Okay, Leah Nazila, she says, yes, may you go over who rules each color. You rule each color. These colors represent, check it out. These colors are the planet's electromagnetic spectrum scale or color spectrum scale. On the infrared, on the red end of the spectrum, this is the visible end. This is where bodies, your five senses, and your root chakra is activated here. I'm showing you 3 or 4 things in one. So what I was saying earlier, because you may have missed it, people cannot see into this range of the spectrum. It starts to become invisible. You can kind of see people's emotions. You can kind of see their thoughts and their desires. But when they start getting into the range of thinking, telepathy, intuition, clairvoyance, psychometry, all of that's not available to the 5 senses. You follow? And what I was saying is that there are beings that live here on your planet in this end of the spectrum. It's just not visible to you. And there's beings that live in the green end of the spectrum. But your visible connection through your senses cannot see it in this range. Turquoise. right? That's the color of your sky. It's letting you know how fast the light is vibrating that you're using to see. So when you in the turquoise, this is where the spirits vibrating on your planet right now. There's a turquoise end of the spectrum. It is not visible. It's not in the visible range. You want to access that range, you got to turn on your ESP at this level. You follow? And there's no one being down. There are a society of beings at each level that might control the way that things go on that spectrum in that dimension. The same way like you got it here in the red spectrum, where you got a body of people that work together and control what go on here. I hope that answers your question. Yeah, I guess it did. I answer more than your question now. But at the ESP level, you want to get up here to the turquoise level, and that's where a lot of people, tend to be drawn in at, is right here in the throat chakra. And growing up, the Luciferians used to make you go to the hospital and you say, my throat hurt, and they just take your tonsils out. When the tonsil is a gland that's connected to your spirit. See that? That's a different type of, y'all got to come out to these seminars, man, because I can't even really go in like I want to here, right? Y'all got to come out to seminar, right? That green and turquoise connected to Jehudi. Yes. Jehudi is in the throat, right? In the green is Het Hiru. Het Hiru is in the green. Sekhmet is in the yellow. Anubu is in the orange. You must have been looking through the site. Red is Asaru, and Geb is in the ground, right? The indigo, that's Oset. The purple, that represents Haru. And the pearl, the divine, represents Nut, or Nut, right? And Nut is the mother of Re. That's his mother. And she's the consort, listen, of Geb. And these are all allegories to make sense of the physical illusion that you signed up for, right? In the physical universe, right? So you just here to experience, externally peer through the senses of the body, right? You are thinking, emotions and your thoughts and your desires are coming through the body, right? It's being generated right here in the mental field. But that's where the mind sees itself, is in the heart. Then it breaks down into 3 dimensions. You got the unconscious mind, you got the subconscious mind, and then you got the superconscious, which is right there in the brow chakra. But everything that crosses the barrier, that signature, that 432 signature, it begins to break down into 3s. Up, down, left, right, forward, and backwards. That's 3 dimensions. And as I was saying before about the people that talk about the earth being flat, the earth cannot be flat. You can't even use that word flat and not include the word deflate. You know how they had Deflate Gate with Bill Belichick and them? Right? The ball was flat. Something would have to first be inflated in order for it to be flat. You just can't have something that's just flat. This is flat. You want to say it's flat? Then we would have to lay down on the side and we would have to operate in 2 dimensions, right? But we don't operate in 2 dimensions. We operate in 3 dimensions. But we're perceiving things linear in 2 dimensions, because when you look at a clock, you put the clock on the wall and that's a 2-dimensional construct, right? Which is called a circle. A sphere is a 3-dimensional construct. And they don't base time on a sphere. They base it on a clock, right? It used to be based on the sun. And that's more in alignment with the sphere. But they moved it from a sundial, because these beings are not sun-based beings. They're moon base. Z Peru, Z Peru, Z Peta. I don't know what you're saying, beloved. Anybody else? Any other questions? Say, what is the Anunnaki? Yes, Sekhmet. The Anunnaki. Anunnaki is a response to a question. And the question was, who sent you here? Right? And the beings that said that said, Anu sent us here, sent us the key on crafts in groups of 50. Said it's Egyptian. Okay, yeah, I'm not Egyptian, beloved. I'm not a Hyksos. I'm a Nuabia, right? I'm a Nuabia, Nuwapian. Said at least show a book. At least show a book of what? Yes, Nubian. Said, what is the Anunnaki? I see I got that hater in the thing. Eon ratio. You said show a book? This is the holy tablets, right? This book was received by my Supreme Grand Master teacher, and he been writing and burning it for over 30 years, right? Melakaza Duck, right? That's who I learned from. And we were talking about the Anunnaki. Let's go into the Enuma Elish. This is the Anunnaki, Lamu. Are you satisfied? Eon ratio? But that's where these stories come out of. And they actually were Akkadian records. This is the father of who you call Anu. His name is Anshar. And he used to be the Anu as well, right? He used to be the Anu. Anu was a title called the Heavenly One. And when the beings came off the craft, and this story is found in the Scientist El Mustawathiya, chapter 3 or tablet 3. Just read the whole thing because it's like reading the never-ending story from that movie when you start reading these stories, right? That are transliterated. Because this man spoke 19 languages, or he wrote 19 languages fluently, but he spoke 23 languages, right? So he had to transliterate a lot of stuff from another language through the languages and through the years to bring it into English. These pages are sticking. I don't want to mess that up. But back to my point, because he's throwing me off kind of threw me off of the point I'm making. When they came here, when these beings came to the earth, they were sent here, said Anu sent us here. Yes, Dr. Melakaza Duck York L. Right? When the being said, who sent you? Said Anu sent us here on crafts in groups of 50. Who was asking the question and who was responding to the question? Right? Said who was the being that held the title of Anu? That was Anshar, his father. His father used to be the Anu. After Anshar had he stepped down and they had a race, the same way that you have a race for president. They had a race for who was going to be the new Anu. And there was a being by the name of Raziel who ended up becoming the Anu right now, right? This is a picture of him here again in the holy tablets. See that? The heavenly one. But what happened, he had a craft called Nibiru. Had a craft that was called Nibiru. And Nibiru came into the Sirius star constellation. And when it came into the Sirius star constellation, it ended up coming through, or to the Canis Major, and it passed through Sirius, and it ended up disrupting the orbital path of the suns in that area, because Nibiru is extremely large. It's about the size of 3 Jupiters, right? And what happened was it started to abstract all of the electrons out of Sirius B. And the beings that were orbiting that planet of Sirius B, which was called Iduma. Iduma was the name of the planet. And there were 3 type of beings that lived on this planet. The 3 beings were the Shaggy, who you call the Yeti or Bigfoot or Saskatchewan, right? Then you had the Markabians. This is a race of grays. You would call them grays, right? But they weren't grays. These were the Markabians. Then you had another group called the Nomos. They lived in the water and in the marshlands. That looked like the being that Lou Gossett Jr. played back in the day. Enemy Mine is the name of the movie. That's what a Nomos looked like. You know, the Dogon called it ugly water creature. That's what it name. That's what the name Nomos come from. Ugly water creature, right? So they had abstracted all of the electrons. He extracted all the electrons out the sun, and it was distorting life on that planet. So hold up, we'll get to that in a second. I'm still trying to break this down. I got you though, so right. So it started to abstract the electrons out the sun, and the beings on that planet needed somewhere else to live. So Anu allowed those beings up on his craft, and they reversed the polarity of the sun and turned it into a white dwarf. This is why Sirius B today has a very hard gravitational pull over Sirius A, which is another sun, and Sirius C. And you can see it in the sky. The Dogon charted it back in 1826, I want to say, prior to what people even having telescope technology. And them fucking Austrians told them that they was fucking crazy and that they was savages and that they was on the peyote and they was just out of their fucking mind with their racist ass. But they had the exact trajectory of the movements of Sirius A, B, and C without no telescope. They just used their eyes because they was activated in the brow chakra, on the quantum level, right? And they couldn't take that. It was like, damn, shit, this is some bullshit. It took them almost 200 years to figure out that these motherfuckers was on point, and they still don't. They don't put that out. They put it out there, but they don't put it out there. Right? Should be working with them with the exploration. But instead, you want to get all the credit for yourself and make it look like you the one. Like I told y'all, they ain't been here that long. But once those beings was put on that craft of Nibiru, it was sent to the planet Earth, right? Which the Shaggy called it Iridu. That's what they called this planet, Iridu. And Iridu means home away from home. What Anu, whose name is Raziel, but he asked of these beings, he said, when you get to the planet Earth, I want you to be custodians over what I've seeded there. Give them the knowledge that you got. Teach them what you know. And then integrate in with the beings. Copulate with them. So the Nomos, the Grays, and the Shaggy is mixed into your ass. And I can prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And when they first got here, the beings that were staying in Samaria at the time were Neolithic. They were very simple. They had primitive tools. And their intelligence had been sped up to that point so that they could function at that level. Then it got sped up again, right? It got sped up again by Enki and Enlil because they wanted to make a man in their image and after their likeness. That's in your Bible, Genesis 1:23. Because it say God asks, let us make man. Who was God asking? That's Enki and Enlil asking their daddy, Anu. Can we make man in our image and after our likeness? You hear me? Because they was coming to make sure everything was Gucci Poochie with the Iduma effect. And those Anunnakis, those beings that were sent in crafts and group of 50s, that was the Shaggies. That's why you got hair on your head, hair under your arms, hair on your kuncha, hair on your gonads if you a fella, right? Some people got hair all down their back, on the back of their calves, all over. They just hairy as a motherfucker. That come from the Shaggy. The Markarbians, which you're calling grays, some of them are grays, some of them are Markarbians. That's why you know about the Merkaba, right? They done integrated into your blood. Blood is composed of plasma. Plasma got solar plasma that came out of a solar wind. And that solar wind came from a cosmic wind that had cosmic plasma that generated your sun. You follow? They integrated into that system, to that plasmatic system, and made molecular bonds on the cellular level with your genome. Same thing with the Merkabian, because if you look at 3 months in a womb, the baby looks just like a grape. It got big eyes, a slit for a nose, and a slit for a mouth. And then the Nomos, the ugly water creature part, you breathe in the water in the womb of your mother, who was a mammal. You inside of your mother showing off reptilian behavior in a mammal. How was that possible? You put a deer up under the ground for 10 minutes, it's dead. You inside your mother womb for 9 months and you don't drown. You hear that? These are your Anunnaki. These are the Anunnakis that came to your planet. And this ain't nothing spooky. I'm aligning stuff up. And like the brother Eon Ratio, he asked me to show you a book. I showed y'all a book. I always cite my source. And for those that know me, y'all can see what's the name up behind me. But a person say, oh, you know what? You know Dr. York? Somebody asked me that the other day. Like, come on, man, you got to ask me that? If you know all that stuff, you shouldn't even be asking that. All that stuff confesses to me is that either you young or you was bullshitting with that shit at the time you should have been around. You wasn't there to pick up the Jews. You decided to, listen to Jigga and DMX. Those was your, you still looking up to fucking entertainers and shit. But that's neither here nor there. I hope that answers your question, sister, as far as who was the Anunnaki. And that's giving you something in context. That's not getting all spooky about the situation, because I've been reading the Holy Tablets a long time. When did the modern Egyptians come to occupy northern Africa, and what was the land's original name? That's an excellent question. They first came into what they're referring to, the Hyksos are referring to as Egypt, back in 515 BCE, right? 515 BCE. You're welcome, Sekhmet. That's before the Christ era. So before the crisis era, or the Christians era, right? They came and sojourned in the land of Amun-Ra, and they refused to leave. And they wasn't no Hyksos dynasty, right? Not at first. Not until after Mesopotamians. But they had to get the knowledge first. So in 515, they squatted there in the land of Ammon, where they saying is Alexandria. They got kicked out of there. And so they had to come down the Nile. And that little area they calling Egypt, that's just where because they was gypsies. If we got any gypsies in the room, they'll tell you gypsies live by the water. They don't have no home. They nomads. You hear me? And those was your original, which end up becoming your Greeks, because all of them came out of Mount Haran. That land was given to the Akkadians. And in your Bible, they say the name Abraham. If you break down the word Abraham, you'll see Ab or Ab, that's for the heart, the spiritual heart, Ra, and Ham. Who is Ham? Ham is him or Kim, right? Who is the father of Canaan, who was cursed by his father Noah, according to your Bible. But in the Akkadian records, they use another name. They say Utnapishtim. And Utnapishtim had to build a craft because the beings that made him said, we're about to flood this area out. Go get the DNA of 2 of every one of the animals and get your homies and your family on this craft. And we about to flood this area out. And we're going to leave it up to you to regenerate it. You and everybody you select. We trust you. This shit is all fucked up. And that was for Enki and Enlil, right? I was for both of their ass. Because they had to course correct. They wanted to do what their daddy did. They wanted to make a man in their image and after their likeness. And that's why that happens twice between 123 and 126. And all of this is delving into my point. So the Canaanites, who came out of the son of Ham, who was the 4th son, Canaan, right? He had 4 sons. His 4th one name was Canaan. He was born with leprosy. He was an albino. He couldn't stay in the warm climate of Samaria. He had to be sent into the caves. They knew that that would work because they came down into what they're calling Egypt now, which was the land of Ammon, where they got the formula. They went to the physician. All of the higher end physicians was here. And these were the cousins, because their father, Anu, is the one who seeded what people refer to as the Egyptians. He the one that seeded them here. That's why it was so much gold in Egypt, because that's what he came here for, was the gold. He tell you that in Genesis chapter 2. Walk with me. So his sons, who said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, the beings that they made in their image and after their likeness ended up producing a being that had a defect, that had albinism, and also had leprosy. Yeah, they calling it vitiligo now, right? But what happened, listen, they used the Hindus too. Nobody never talk about the Hindu. Enki worked with them Hindus because he was from this planet. And to put it in some full context for you, because all of this is all relative. Enki already lived on the planet. He already knew about the beings. He knew about making your own being after your own image and after your own likeness. So after millions and billions of years of his daddy coming back and forth here, he happened to have Enlil with him one time. And he said, he heard Enki say, let me make man, and let us make man in our image and after our likeness. We didn't let you didn't see what you did, now let us do it. Right? And Leo got jealous of Enki because Enki was from that planet, and all that time he didn't want to do it. He didn't care to do it. But this time he asked, let us make man in our image. And Anu said, yeah, go ahead. That's when he started cutting up the land and cutting the land into parts so that they wouldn't fuck with what he had going on. Right? So The beings that they produced that came out of Canaan and out of them Hindus. Because if you look at an albino Hindu, tell me you don't see fucking Terry Bradshaw. You can pull up the Google. This for educational purposes only, TikTok. My intent is not to bully or to castigate anyone in a negative light, right? But if you pull up albino Hindu, what you're going to see is a Terry Bradshaw. You're going to see, my man from Happy Days. Not the Fonz, the other dude. But you're going to look and be like, damn, it look like regular white people. That's where the white people come from. People be wondering where the white people come from. You came out of Hindus. Hindus and the Negroid seed. The albino versions of us brought forth the sixth ether albino, right? Now the sixth ether being, the Asiatic black man, that's the Hindu. These are two different things. They had to stay up in the caves of Mount Haran in the Caucasus Mountains, which was even a colder climate. Now, the first tribes to come out of there were the Amorites, which by geographical region and rulership, the Akkadians ruled over all of that area. They ruled everything in Samaria. And this was a direct descendant from either Enki or Enlil with Sargon, who you call Nimrod in your Bible in Genesis 11, when it talk about the tongues being babbled. And this is why I bust up a whole bunch of religious scholars, because they'll start to talk about what it says in the Bible and what language that Jesus spoke and all of this shit. But I'll be like, hold up, right here in Genesis 11, it said, didn't nobody know what the fuck was going on after Yahweh, who was actually Tammuz, right? Which is also a month in the Jewish calendar. Go ask any Jew and they'll tell you like, yeah, we got a month called Tammuz. We certainly do. But they won't tell you where Tammuz came from. Because they were the Amorites, the so-called Jews today. These were the Amorites that was learning from the Akkadians. They learned their stuff from the Akkadian Empire. They had a 1,000-year head start over the rest of the Caucasians. You hear me? These were your gypsies. Because they once took over the Akkadian Empire. And they had to be given commandments and laws, and they had to be given that shit. 613 of them. They unruly. You see what they're doing in the world today? I'm just putting it out there for y'all, man. Y'all, hey, y'all got to tap the screen, man. Y'all ain't even tapping that screen. Help me reach my limits on my gifts and all that shit so that they don't block this shit. Because they going to block, they want to make sure that this live don't stay up. Said, what were the gypsies' names? I'm still getting to it. I'm breaking all that down. These are the Amorites. They didn't have no damn name. They was the Amorites. They end up becoming your Syrians, your Persians, your Mesopotamians, your Turks, right? Your Iranians, your Iraqians. And a group of them that had enough sense not to touch the fucking fire and to take on make themselves available to somebody. They came across the Mediterranean Sea because they didn't know how to use boats or none of that shit. Let's not get it twisted. Let's not get it twisted, man. These wasn't no bright motherfuckers like that. See, they set the narrative off to make you think that things was one way, but it was really another way. And the way that it was is that they squatted in that area that they call in Egypt for 100 years. And they was defiling these areas with their trash and their litter. They had no culture or none of that. They wasn't into the occult centers. And Ahmose the First, word got down into Nubia, in the land of Ra, where Ahmose the First was. And they had told them that these people had taken up captivity here and that they needed to be fucking removed. They was defiling the fucking land. People couldn't get into the occult centers because they thought that they had a right to be there because they all of a sudden they born there. The same way that you see the Caucasians today here in America say that they proud to be an American and this is their land and all that. Bitch, you was an immigrant. This is not your land. They did that same shit in Egypt, what they're calling Egypt. That's why I don't like to use that word Egypt. I'm like, yo, that's a Greek word. That's Hyksos. That's corporate, right? That's their corporate matrix. Even back then, because we taught them everything that they knew. The Akkadians. That's where they learned how to read, write, the linguistic system and all of that shit. That started with Akkadia. These was niggas with cornrows. That's why they try to cover that up. That's outside the range of the Proto-Indo-European linguistic tree, which operates on a different timeline than actual reality, right? So these beings took part and they sojourned in that area, and almost the first ran their ass the fuck up out of there. They ended up spreading off into Greece, Romania, which predated Rome, Bulgaria, Germany, and Russia. And they started to develop their own languages from there. Then you had the Phoenicians, who don't have a definitive home. Them or the Mesopotamia. There's no place that's called Mesopotamia. There is no place called Phoenicia. They was everywhere. They had the most influence. Their influence overran borders. This is how these beings were able to take over, because they was dealing with a new population of people that didn't know how to read or write. I told you guys that before too. Y'all need to go get my book, Rudy Paradigm. They didn't know how to fucking read. That's why they had to have faith and belief. I showed you that, guys, that earlier this week too. Y'all need to become subscribers, because I got to put all that information up into subscribers. These, I got to pay for the Google space to keep all this shit. So y'all got to just subscribe to the page. Support the platform. It ain't like, man, y'all got to start supporting the platform. I can't just support the platform by myself any longer. People have to start supporting, because then I can upload and download more information and get it back uploaded to you. For the TikTok, for the YouTube, I still got like 7 hours of videos I'm uploading to YouTube right now. Right now, I'm using 3 phones to do all this stuff and my laptop. But that's when them beings first came in, beloved. That was 515 BCE, and by 615 BCE, they was kicked up out of there. And when they came back in, they came with the Mesopotamian army of what's this punk ass nigga name? Alexander the Fake, right? And Alexander the Fake, his goofy ass came and they obliterated all the records. They burnt all the records and shit. Like, these fuckers, they kicked my grandma away from the river. You hear me? That's what was really going on in this month. And they wasn't feeling that, man. It was like, yo, we got to spend a block on these niggas. They done kicked us up out of this bitch, made us go to these little cold ass. You hear me? You ain't think they little baloney ass, smelling ass wasn't gonna try to get back? Like, shit, man, we got to get back at these motherfuckers. I hope that answers your question, beloved. 515 BCE to 615 BCE. Or I could be saying it backwards. It might be 551 BCE to 651 BCE. But they only had 100 years occupancy. They try to act like they was ruling over some shit for a long period of time. Y'all was just squatting. If you wasn't squatting, you wouldn't have your damn children over there right now changing all the faces of the women in the temples to white women. They doing that shit right now. Right? And we care more about Prada than we do about Offset. We care more about Balenciaga than we give a fuck about Mayat. We care more about Maybelline and eyelashes and all that shit. We don't give a fuck about what's going on in the temples. I'm talking about the women as a whole. You hear me? And they done took your shit from you. They doing witchcraft on your ass. You getting hit with some shit you don't even know you getting hit with. And a lot of you young sisters like, ah, shit, I got time. You know, I can finesse these niggas for the next 15, 20 years. You wasting your fucking time doing that goofy shit. You better get your ass in alignment like you see in a lot of these young brothers doing. You hear me? Straight up and down. That's what's going on. This the last war crop for y'all. Cause see, they already tried to take the men. They took the men and put them in prison and turned them into animals. People that act recklessly, what y'all calling crash outs today, they only doing that because they don't know themselves. If you know who you are, you ain't gonna do nothing crazy to do something reckless to yourself or to anyone else. You use a lot of critical thinking when it comes to your thoughts, words, and actions. You won't just like, let me just black out on niggas. Right? Any other questions? What's that you say? Can you use in our children's? I don't know. They didn't come out right, loved one. You might want to say that again. Any other questions? Hope I've been answering you guys' questions okay, by the way. Come and join us in Atlanta, March the 7th and the 8th for the 1089 seminar. Tickets are available on the website. 1089 seminar. It's not going to be actually in Atlanta. We're going to be outside of Atlanta in Duluth, right? So what was Una's range like? I don't know what you're talking about. Gonna have to be a little bit more specific than that. Shit, Eunice. Are you talking about Ahmos? Yeah, you got to be clear. I don't like to guess. You're on that guessing frequency. You got to get on that guessing frequency, brother. That's why I tell y'all to ask. If you want if you want me to give you a clear answer, you got to ask me a clear question. Because then you asking me to guess what your question is about. I don't want to guess. Anybody else? Any other questions? Again, come join us in Atlanta, March the 7th and the 8th for the 1089 seminar. Join us on the 7th for Raynology 102. Or come and join us for the Science of the Netaru. We'll be going over Het Hiru, and that will be on Sunday. Or get a VIP ticket and get access to both. Come join us for the prerequisite to the seminar. We'll be showing people how to meditate, breathing techniques, how to inhale sunlight, how to charge up your brow chakra with the sunlight, grounding, meditating, and hitting a few people with the staff. All the VIP members, y'all will get hit with the staff a few times. You know what I mean? Everybody, y'all go. You gotta get a VIP. If you want to get hit with the staff more than one day, you gotta get a VIP ticket, right? Because it's a lot to go into that. I'm telling you. Like, man, I don't know man. Said, who are the Egyptians? Said, the Egyptians, listen, when you say Egyptian, those are the Hyksos. Those are the Greeks. They end up becoming your Greeks, right? They were the Amorites. Some of them were Canaanites. Some of them were Persians. Some of them were Turks. And they gathered together in the enclave of beings that squatted in the Happy Nile Valley, in what we refer to as Lower Egypt. Because everything starts in Nubia and Tanzania and Kenya and Uganda. That's where the civilizations lived at. They just telling y'all where these occult centers and all that shit at. And they thought that they could squat in those areas and thrive and live. And, you know, that shit got down to the people, you know, back in in Ra, which was the name of the land was Amun Ra. But those are the Egyptians. Those are the Greeks. Those are Caucasian. What you're referring to as Caucasians or mulattoes that was mixed in with Hindus, and they was mixed in with some so-called black people, the Negroid. That's the seed that I will refer to us as, right? But that's all. That's an Egyptian. That word Egyptian itself is a Greek word. That's not even. Those people in that land didn't call that. They called it Amun Ra or Amun Re. That was the land of Amun Ra. It never was called Egypt. It was never even called Kemet. So was the four corners of the planet actually copper color? You're going to have to be a little bit more descriptive. What do you mean? The four corners of the planet. The four corners of the planet used to be the color of the water. Are you talking about the people? Because the planet don't really got no corners on it now. I know what you're talking about. In that, yeah, the people. Yeah, I said that in yesterday's. You probably wasn't here, but we indigenous to the planet. We was here when they bought it out the water. When you go back to Tontanin, Tontanin is enough. I don't be wanting to hear people not talking about Tontanin. I don't be wanting to hear nothing they got to say.